Hello, I'm Dr. Vanita Rattan from the Hyperpigmentation Clinic. Today we actually have a very different video, but I think a very important video. This whole month has been Mental Health Awareness Month, and today's video is really about men's mental health. And I know the vast majority of people who follow me are female, but we all have fathers or sons or partners, and it's really important for us to know how they're feeling and how to have better communication, more effective communication with them. So today I'm being joined with Raj. So Raj Gulsia, thank you so much for joining us. He's a mental health coach and a well-being coach. So he's fantastic because he's got the male perspective, which is, you know, what I find very insightful, and I'm sure a lot of you will too. So thank you very much for joining us, Raj.
Yeah, good to be here.
Okay, so I think the first question I wanted to talk about was what language should we be using with the men in our family to give them space to let us know how they're feeling without judgment. What sorts of words should we be using? How do we open that conversation?
Sure, yeah. So I guess, the judgment part comes in play when it kind of becomes like a parent to child relationship, even with adults, right? So if you're kind of speaking to someone in a way which is kind of forceful, or you should do this, or what's wrong, it's kind of confrontational, right? So I guess if you look at it a better way, it's just really meeting each other in the middle on the same level and saying, I'm noticing something's different about you, or I'm noticing you don't, maybe something's off, right? What is it? What's going on? It's like open questions, right? Mm-hmm. Just letting them take the lead rather than accusing and saying, what's wrong with you? Or, yeah, you know what I mean, right?
No, I fully understand. Okay, so the other thing is, like, for example, with my son, what sorts of language should I be using with a 3-year-old boy to make it okay for him to talk about his feelings and not say things like, man up and, be a man and all that kind of stuff? What sort of language should we be using with them?
Yeah, I think that definitely doesn't help for children especially, right? Because they are so emotionally driven. They haven't really developed that mature and logical part of the brain, because I think it starts developing after, it fully develops by the ages of 21. But when they're in those younger ages, it's all emotional driven. They're using that part of their brain. So if you say something like, be a man, or why are you acting like that? It just feels like defensive, and they just take that and believe that, right? Yeah. So instead of kind of putting labels onto the children, which they will remember, and that will become a belief, and that might limit them, right? They might think, okay, I'm not good enough, I'm not a man, and that will stay with them for their whole life, potentially. Yeah. So instead, the better way is, again, open questions and a calm tone, again, meeting them in the middle. So it doesn't sound intimidating, or it doesn't sound like you're putting, judgment on them, or you're saying, what's wrong with you? Instead, it's saying, how are you feeling?
Yeah. Yeah.
How was your day? Like, just really calm and simple questions, and letting them open up and tell you, right? Instead of assuming.
Yeah. And making it normal, I feel like, for them to talk about their feelings. So not treating your daughter differently to your son. Like, you might say to your daughter who's crying, how are you feeling? What happened? How can I help? But if your son's crying, would you say the same words? Or would you say, chin up, be a man, and, grow up? I think treating them the same, even in that respect, is so important, and constantly checking in with them and how they're feeling. I do this thing with my son. I say to him, you know, every day I ask him, how are you feeling? What's going on in your heart? And he's so funny. He's only 3, so he hasn't got much vocabulary at the moment. So it's either good or bad. But at least just opening it and making it okay to talk about your feelings, and not like a taboo thing that that's a female thing and not a male thing. Because we're all human. We all feel, you know.
Yeah, because the amount of times I've heard fathers say to their sons, you know, don't cry, you know, why you know, just like those kind of things, like man up or don't be a wuss.
Yeah,
That just gets passed down, right? It gets passed down from generation to generation, and then that kid will start believing that's the way to act, and then it will just get passed down, right? So it's not going to end unless somebody kind of breaks that chain.
Yeah. Okay. So in modern day, obviously it's very different to how it used to be, you know, when there was, the man was the head of the household, the man made all the decisions, the man couldn't afford to show any weakness, had to be strong at all times because, you know, everyone was relying on him. Whereas nowadays, it's that women are also educated and taking responsibility and sharing the, you know, sharing the work that has to be done, you know, financially, etc. Do you think that there's less pressure on a man, and so maybe a man is able to open up more and talk about their flaws and how they're feeling? Or do you think that they're still stuck in that mentality from before where they had to be central to the household?
Yeah, I think that mentality has stayed, definitely, because even though, yeah, times have changed, you know, quite rapidly in the last century, where men and women are equally both working, that mentality's definitely stayed of, I have the pressure as the man to look after everything, and everything's under my responsibility, right? So I definitely think it stayed, and that's a hard one to kind of untrain with people.
Is that training, do you think, or do you think that's evolutionary, that's inherent in a man, or would you think it was training?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, interesting. So I think it's probably part of both, actually. So it's evolutionary, definitely, because yeah, the man wants to lead the pack and, you know, be the strongest and be the best. And there's other people out there who they want to compare themselves against and be better than them, even your own friends, right? And that's just the nature, right? That nature will stay within us all, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a difficult one to change, I'd say.
What do we look for in a man when they're in trouble but don't know how to communicate it? What are the sort of outward signs that we should be paying attention for?
Yeah, so things such as lack of energy and lack of motivation, lack of drive for life, right? You know, that life force, that light that people usually have, that excitement when there's things going on. When there's kind of no motivation and no interest in things that the person previously had interest in, that's kind of a sign to say something else is going on here. They haven't got that light going through them anymore.
So that's probably, you're coming up to clinical depression at that point. Do you think there's a pre-set of feelings that happen before you go into depression that you know, where we can maybe pick up on things and try and turn things around?
Yeah, I think like even that to some level, right? If there's a lack of interest, less interest than before, and things like rage and random outbursts of emotion, because it's almost like that storing up somewhere, and it's got to come out somehow. So that sometimes will come out as rage. It might come out as they will just not want to talk and they'll close up completely. So those kind of unusual behaviors, I'd say, to look out for.
Interesting. So you with rage is a very typical one that I've seen in men. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, men will say, oh, my wife has said I've got an anger problem, and you know, a lot of men would say this. It's very difficult in that moment to have a conversation with someone who is having a bit of rage or snaps easily or gets angry easily, how on earth do you unpack that? I mean, how is a partner or daughter supposed to unpack that?
Yeah, so I think the best way to deal with these kind of things, because that's emotionally driven, right? That sometimes, like, people will say, I couldn't control myself. It just came from somewhere. And that again goes back to the way we're built, right? We're emotionally driven. Things just flood out before we can think about it, before we can control it and stop it. So really, the only way to deal with this is, some people have actually a rule where when the other person is angry, they just won't talk to their partner. They'll wait till they calm down, right? So actually couples sometimes have this rule between them. They say, okay, if we get into this argument, let's just cool off. And some people have this rule where they say, I'm going to let you speak for 1 minute. I'm not going to interrupt. And then you get your turn to speak for 1 minute. And that just dissolves the situation slowly, because you're giving that person respect, letting them speak, and you're not interrupting and not fighting, right? So that's one way to do it. But if you're kind of seeing in your partner that, yeah, there's just constant rage, I think the only way to do it is to approach them when they're not in that place, because this is not gonna go anywhere if they're kind of seeing red.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Yeah, no, that's a really difficult one. I actually think that rage is coming because they don't know how to communicate how they're actually feeling. That rage could be coming because they're feeling inadequate. They may have lost their job, or something else has happened, or they're having an argument with somebody else and they can't seem to communicate. Okay, I'm feeling low, or I'm feeling frustrated, or they can't seem to get across, and it goes straight to anger. And I don't know whether this is maybe inbuilt since childhood, because you haven't been taught to talk. Whereas girls, you can't stop my daughter from talking. It's very inherent in girls to communicate every single tiny little detail. Whereas men and boys are a little bit different, but then they don't have the tools in place to say, okay, I'm feeling this way, or I'm feeling this way, let alone, it's not even from a trying to be hard perspective. It's like they don't even have the basic tools to have that conversation. So maybe that's the thing that we need to be teaching our boys from a young age, is keep every day, tell me how you're feeling and why you're feeling it and how we can work through it.
Exactly, because then it becomes a reflection process, right? Like, if some anger happens earlier in the day, you can reflect on that later, and you can say, okay, what was something that happened today that wasn't so pleasant? Okay, maybe it was that incident that happened. Let's reflect on that. What kind of thoughts were going on when I was feeling that? What emotions were happening? What did I feel in my body? Did I feel like this rage and this energy? And it's just like having that reflection time, both for children and for adults, right? Because then when you're in that place after it's happened, you're in a calm, reflective mode. So you can actually look back and say, okay, this is what happened. This is maybe why it happened. And with that, you grow and you become used to that reflection, and then the anger starts dissipating almost.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. My dad does this thing where he always says, like he goes to therapy now. This is an alpha male Asian who, never think would do therapy. And I'm so proud of him for going, because he never had the tools to talk about how he was feeling. And now he goes, Vanita, all I need to do is I confront an emotion. I say, I can see that I'm feeling frustrated. He would literally talk to his emotional frustration and say, I can see it. I'm not hiding from you. I know I'm frustrated. And he says it dissipates. It's actually, that surprises me, because when I try that technique with myself, it definitely doesn't work. I actually think the frustration gets bigger when I do that. But the fact that a grown Asian alpha male immigrant who, had to be hard and strong his whole life, who, gone through bullying and everything else, was able to learn techniques in his 60s means anyone can learn it. And one thing I found really interesting actually right now is a very difficult time, I think, for a lot of men. A lot of people are losing their jobs. I mean, it's an awful time for so many people. And my husband actually went out the other day with his friends. I remember me and you were talking. So who are men supposed to talk to? Are they supposed to talk to their other alpha male friends who you may, not take it seriously and make them feel worse? But interestingly enough, they all started opening up about having anger issues, and their other halves telling them that they had anger issues and where that emotion was coming from. And now a lot of them are going to therapy, and a lot of them are unpacking how they're feeling and why they're feeling that way, which is new. This I don't think would have happened years ago. I think this is a new movement that's taking place, because 10 years ago they were all taking the mick out of each other, let alone over little things, so deep. So I do think that they can change. I do think men have got the tools to be able to change. It's just almost normalizing that it's okay to talk.
Exactly. It's the stigma, isn't it? It's the stigma of worrying about what, how it's perceived and your own self-worth. And, your dad's example is amazing, actually, because what he's really doing is he's practicing mindfulness, isn't he? And that's kind of what I do with the people I work with. It's mindfulness-based coaching. It's, okay, let's observe what happened from a distance, from a disconnected state. You're not that emotion, you're watching it. And then it disappears because, like you said, it's not chasing you anymore. It's not controlling you. You're letting go and you're looking at it. And now it's smaller than you actually thought it was.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other thing you discussed before, which was really interesting, was parenting, and how if your boy is being shy, or if he, is embarrassing you by crying, I think shouting at your son for doing that is more of a reflection on your parenting skills than on the son. It's almost like you being embarrassed that your son isn't good enough, or that you've been a bad parent, and so you're taking out on the child to say, look at the other boys, like, why are they running around and confident, and like, what's wrong with you? And then the child looks at like God has, like, they look at your parents like God, authority in my life has told me that I'm shy and I'm not good enough and I shouldn't man up. We literally say the absolute worst things to our boys as if that makes them tougher, but it destroys them.
Yeah, exactly. And really you're just reflecting your own worries maybe out on them, because it's not their fault that they're like this, they're just being a kid, but you're reflecting what your fears are potentially. And like you said, they only know their parents. They don't, like, their parents are their best friends. And at that age when everything's emotionally driven and they don't have that logical mind developed properly, where they can say, okay, maybe my parent was angry. No, they don't think like that. They think, my parent says this, so this is true. Now I am this, the shy thing you said. So now I am shy. This is my identity. And then they end up carrying that throughout their whole life. And, even as adults, they will stay as that person. So it's, parents have to really be careful what they say and how they say it, in which kind of tone as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. In terms of husbands and wives, giving the other one space to do the exercise or play football or go gym or whatever it is, I feel like a lot of couples tend to almost stop the other person. They haven't seen their husband all day, and the husband's been at work all day, and they've barely had time at home, let alone now they want to go and play football. And a lot of frustration happens here. But the man, how important is it, number one, for the man to go and do his football and gym, etc.? And number two, how's that balance supposed to happen? Should the woman be encouraging the man to go and play football, etc.? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I think definitely people need their space and their own activities to be themselves, right? To do what they enjoy, because even before you got married, you had your own interests. You had, things that you enjoyed doing. So if this is something that's serving them and is important and is helping their mental health, making them feel more relaxed, being with their friends, you know, hanging out with different people, hearing stories, you know, all of that kind of stuff keeps your brain healthy and your brain happy, because you're connecting with other people. You're not just cooped up at home. Yeah, of course you love your partner, but you still need other things to stimulate you. And yeah, I'd say it's really important, and it should be encouraged from both sides, right? For both people to have their own other things going on, and then yeah, sure, come back and have your time together as well.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. I remember you saying in our last discussion about suicide, and suicide really being an epidemic in men under 35, literally being the #1 cause of death of men under 35. And that really shook me, because, you know, we always talk about drugs and alcohol, and, you know, you don't want to buy your son a motorcycle because, you know, he may have a motorcycle accident. We think about these things as much greater than suicide. It's just something that we just don't seem to discuss, but it's something that we absolutely need to, in order to help our society, you know, help the men in our society. So and the other thing that's making me nervous is with COVID and another lockdown and, you know, recession and people losing jobs. For me, it just feels like a bit of a train wreck, you know, like waiting to happen, where people have their blueprint of what they expect life to be, and then they're where they are right now because of X, Y, and Z that's happened out of their control, and they're not at their blueprint. And then there's this mismatch of unhappiness, and now men can't discuss their unhappiness, and then the next step is drastic. So looking at where we are right now, what steps should we be taking? Should we be looking for? What mistakes should we be avoiding? Just because I think a lot of us are going through this right now.
Yeah, and I think the #1 thing is isolation, stuck within your own mind, right? And nobody gets anywhere by trying to deal with things on their own, in their own head, because it will start going against them at some point. And then once it starts going against you so much, that's when it becomes like suicidal thoughts, right? When you think, I have nobody, I have nothing in life, that what is the point of even living? And I don't even know who to talk to about this. Like, how can I even share this with someone to say that my life is so bad that I want to take it? That's a scary place. So really, the isolation, being with yourself only, is the biggest thing. So the only way I'd say to get out of this is connecting with someone else, sharing your thoughts with someone. You don't have to say, okay, you know, it depends what end of the scale you're on. If you're just feeling bad and you're losing your job and just feeling a bit down, even sharing that is useful. Saying to someone, okay, I think things are not as good as they could be. Just having a connection with anyone. You can, you know, if you don't want to share with family, if you don't want to share with someone you know, there's also helplines that you can call into, like Mind UK. You can call into Samaritans. There's loads of different helplines where you could just call someone anonymously. They don't even need to know who you are. It's just speaking to anyone, connecting with a human. And that's probably, I guess, the #1 thing to get out of it. And the other thing actually I'll add is, this is why some people will turn to alcohol and drugs and whatever else to help them get out of their head, because they feel like that alcohol will, you know, unleash and help me with this problem. But ultimately it doesn't, and that can lead to even more health problems.
Yeah. No, I know. I think alcoholism is on the rise. Everything negative, like vices, in order to try and escape what you're currently feeling, is on the rise.
Yeah.
But I just think the most important thing really is to make everyone aware of the issue, and to normalize this, to normalize men talking about their feelings. This should not be a taboo thing. That is just insanity, to think that men don't have feelings and that they shouldn't be feeling, because we're not creating soldiers and robots. We are creating humans who have empathy, who love and do have anger, do have emotion. So no, I think this is going to be so beneficial to so many people. We're currently all in the same boat, and what's happening right now is not anybody's fault. COVID happened to the world. This happened to you, and anyone getting angry or feeling depressed about their situation, it wasn't your fault. This happened to us. No one right now is on track with their blueprint. Everyone has a blueprint. Yeah. Every single person. And I feel like now is the first time that it should almost feel safe to talk about it, because it's not because of lack of education or lack of intelligence or lack of muscles or whatever. This happened to all of us. It should hopefully make it okay and acceptable to talk about where men are and how they're feeling. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the one thing that everyone can do, no matter what situation they're in, is everyone can pick out a few things that they're grateful for. I think I don't know if I shared this story with you last time, but there's this old story where somebody was saying, I was worried about how rough my shoes were looking until I met someone with no legs. And that's gratitude, right? Because you think things are going bad for you, but then you can meet someone who's got it so much worse. Yeah. So everyone's got something that they can be grateful for, even if it's just being able to walk. Yeah. And that instantly changes your, the chemistry in your brain to create positive connections.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think a lot of it is perspective. So I remember we had a restaurant once, and I remember we lost a lot of money, and we were really low about it. We'd invested all our savings into this restaurant, and we were in our 20s, and we were high on life, thinking everything we touched would work. Overconfident and made a lot of mistakes. And I remember feeling so low. My mom said, Vanita, this is just a business. It's not your life. It's just a business. Close the business and you're still living. You're still breathing. You still got a brain. You can still work and you can still function. So just put it into perspective. Do you know how lucky you are to be where you are, born into the family you're born into, and have so much love? Get it into perspective, and that actually really helped, because sometimes when you're in the problem is overwhelming. It's over your head and you can't breathe and you don't know which way is up. Whereas when you've got someone from outside saying to you, okay, let's just really reassess. Number one, you're lucky that you were born as a human in this country with all the opportunities, and if it's not this opportunity, it'll be another opportunity. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it feels like a big deal, but we can get through it. So giving yourself perspective and then talking about the things you're grateful for, you mentally can't be grateful and sad at the same time. It's just impossible to have two thoughts in our brain at the same time. So I totally doing your gratitude every morning, your 10 things you're grateful for, should almost be something that we're doing with our children.
Yeah.
Age. Some people pray, some people don't believe in God, but at least your spiritual time where you're saying the things you're grateful for, I think, are essential for everybody.
Definitely. Exactly. And like you said, it gets you out of that state, and, speaking to somebody else as well, like you mentioned when you spoke to your mum, so helpful, because they can help you. You might have blind spots and you might not notice some things. So, speaking to someone else opens that up completely. And the other thing is with your business example, you realize that business is a business, but you are you. They're separate things, really. Even though we get attached to everything, we make everything personal, no matter what it is. Even if somebody says something that is remotely to do with you, maybe like your sofas in the background, maybe someone remarks on your sofas, I don't know, stuff like that. And you will just take that so personally. It's the same with everything, jobs, business, and that's natural, of course. But in the end, if we come back to what we have, which is our body and ourselves, then all of the rest, we detach from that and we remind ourselves of, okay, what's important? Let me detach from those things that are not so important.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Thank you so much, Raj, for today. If you could just send me those links, it'd be amazing. I'll write them in the description box for everybody below.
Sure.
If any of you are watching and this has meant something to you, or you've gone through a similar thing, or you're struggling yourself, please can you write it down below. I'm going to respond to as many comments as I can, because whatever you're going through, I promise you 1,000 of other people are going through similar feelings. And please can we respond to each other, make this a really safe space where we as a community, our community is beautiful. We really have such a loving group of us on YouTube, and if we could all, you know, just help each other and respond to each other, it's just another way of having connection in a time where people are in lockdown and are being isolated. I'd really appreciate that. Yeah. Super. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you so much, Raj, for joining us. It's
been a pleasure.
An honor having you. And I will put Raj's links in our description box below too, so you can follow him. He gives fantastic advice, and you can even message him personally too. Yeah. Super. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.